Welcome to The Source, where we combine the headlines with in-depth conversations with the news makers themselves. Sitting in for Pinky Webb, I'm Ria Tanwat Cotrillo. Today on the program, a pre-election survey shows the UniTeam tandem keeping a steady lead in the national race, but a former national statistician says the numbers do not hold water. With a seeming majority support for the survey frontrunners, is there still a chance, a fighting chance for other candidates? Pulse Asia President Ronald Holmes joins us live. And later, the camp of detained Senator Laila de Lima wants the Justice Department to immediately drop the drug charges against her after two witnesses retracted their allegations of her supposed involvement in the illegal drug trade. Prosecutor General Benedicto Malcontento joins us live. Barely any movement in voter preference in the final Pulse Asia pre-election survey. The survey was held from April 16th to 21st among 2,400 respondents nationwide. Former Senator Bongbong Marcos kept his lead against second placer Vice President Leni Robredo by a wide margin, while Senator Manny Pacquiao edged out Manila Mayor Isko Moreno for third spot. But a former Secretary General of the National Statistical Coordination Board is pointing out flaws in the allocation of sample respondents. Let's go straight to the source of the story. Pulse Asia President Ronald Holmes joins us now. Ronald, good morning. Thank you so much for being here. So as we said, there's almost no movement in your last survey before the May 9 polls. Frontrunner Bongbong Marcos, he's retaining his lead at 56%, while the distant second is Vice President Leni Robredo at 23%. Tell us more about this.
Well, yes, there's no change from survey to survey. Changes are all marginal following the survey to survey margins of error. You still have the former Senator Bongbong Marcos getting 56% and Vice President Leni Robredo getting 23%. So they're the front runners, and the others have single-digit preferences with Isko Moreno and Manny Pacquiao still statistically tied, with Manny Pacquiao at 7% and Manila Mayor at 4%, and followed by Senator Ping Lacson at 2%. So there's no change. We don't see a change in the areas also in terms of voting support in NCR, the balance of Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao, and across socio-economic classes.
All right, so what do these numbers tell us? What do they reflect? Does it mean that beating Marcos Jr. at this point is statistically impossible now?
Not necessarily. I don't think it would not be from my end, at least. I don't think that we can in any way just reduce it to a question of statistics. What we do see is that within this span of time before we conducted the survey, that compared to the March survey, maybe there were certain conditions that kept people at with the voting decision that they had in March. But we don't know what are the events that transpired and how those events that transpired after the survey would impact on the eventual voting decision on May 9.
All right, so Ronald, what do you think could change, and how should other candidates treat this survey?
Well, a number of things. If we try to be mindful about what's happening in, one is that we've seen many candidates now intensifying their campaign advertisements, both on mainstream and social media. You have candidates still going on in terms of their barnstorming, and I think this is the primary area of their campaign over the past month. They've gone into campaign rallies. So candidates are trying to best each other in terms of the crowd that they're able to gather. And you have other candidates that are doing, or one specific candidate whose supporters are doing house-to-house campaigns, which again is something new, which we might see the effects of only on May 9.
Right. No, you said in your interview last month that something crucial has to happen in the last 2 minutes of the fight, and we are down to the last few days of this campaign. Do you think this hasn't happened then for the rest of the candidates?
Well, I think the other candidates, at least the ones who are catching up, should be able to deliver messages that will really be compelling enough for voters to consider them, and for these voters who are supporting the frontrunner to shift their support from the frontrunner to the other candidates. Those are messages that should actually highlight the qualities of the candidate themselves rather than simply attack or demean the front runner for that matter. We'll see this in probably it's seen in their campaign advertisements. It will also be seen in their final meeting de avance, which will be held a couple of days or the last day of the campaign before election day.
So how likely is it for Marcos to get the majority of votes? Have you seen this type of trend, this type of lead in the past?
Well, we've seen leads which were significant, but only to the extent that the candidate got a plurality of the voting support. Well, the likelihood of him getting majority voting support on May 9 is there. It's possible, but this might still decline. It depends really on the extent by which supporters of any of these candidates will turn out. That's something that we cannot in any way predict. Will the voters who express support for specific candidates actually vote on election day?
Right. I want to talk about Vice President Robredo for a second. There was a 1% drop for her from 24% last month. Is this 1% drop significant or not really?
No, it's marginal. It's an insignificant drop. She basically retained the support that she had, which is about close to 1 out of 4 Filipinos are supportive of the vice president in this presidential race.
Again, her numbers haven't really changed, right? Do you think she has any kind of momentum, or can we say, based on this last survey, that this is it, this is her ceiling?
It's hard to say whether the momentum is there or whether it isn't there. What we did see is that there was a significant change from February to March. Whether this significant change is something that's boiling and it will be seen in the next few days or on May 9 is really, I mean, we don't have a survey that will come out anymore. So that means we'll see it on May 9. Whether the trajectory of the vice president in terms of this, the campaign strategies that her team is using will really register itself with higher voting support on May 9.
All right, let's talk now about Senator Manny Pacquiao. He's now at third place with 7%. Manila Mayor Isko Moreno dropped to 4%. What do you think happened here? And was this an effect of the so-called Easter press conference of Isko Moreno and the other presidential candidates?
We cannot rule out that there might have been an effect of the Easter Sunday press conference. The main reason I say so is because the Easter Sunday press conference came more or less at the earlier part of our field work. So it depends on whether the reports about the Easter Sunday press conference resonated to the public. So for that matter, I could not rule out that that might actually affect or might have affected the voting support for Isko Moreno. But as I said, if you look at the numbers numbers basically unchanged from March. The changes are really just within the margins of error from survey to survey.
Right. So statistically, they're tied. You said earlier, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, let's go now to the vice presidential race where you have Davao City Mayor Sara Duterte still leading at 55%. Tito Soto is at 18%. So, is this a lead by Sara Duterte that can no longer be overcome? Because again, it is another really big lead. Or do you think na kaya pa rin makahabol yung mga kalaban niya?
It's a rather big gap between her and the second running Tito Soto. Ria, the one that you can see on this graphic really is that the two contenders are actually statistically tied for second place. This is Senate President Tito Soto and Senator Kiko Pangilinan. The gap between them and Sara Duterte is quite significant, but it's a gap that can be addressed by really focusing their campaign on areas where they can generate more votes. And I think that's what the candidates have been doing. I've seen reports of basically all of the candidates, including Senate President Soto and Kiko Pangilinan. really going on their own in terms of campaigning across the country, for that matter.
Right. Now, some supporters may dismiss the survey results because of what's happening in their huge rallies where you have hundreds of thousands of supporters attending, and the survey results seem to belie this support. So how do you reconcile the images and the happenings on the ground with these survey results?
Well, it's true that the rallies are increasing in terms of the crowd size. That will show to you the number of partisans of the candidates are actually increasing. But in an election, there are both partisans and there are spectators. And for the most part, many of the voters have not been as manifest in terms of their support. They have not attended their rallies. These are the voters that we capture in randomly done surveys. And I don't know whether those voters will also be influenced by the rallies that are reported out on media. So we do not in any way, I don't think you can deny the intensity that you see in the rallies that are waged by the contenders, but the crowd who attend these rallies will just be a fraction of the total voting population.
Right. Okay, I want to go now to the comments of former national statistician Romulo Virola. He had comments and analysis of your surveys, and he pointed out three flaws or biases in your sampling where certain sectors are either under or over represented. So if we can unpack that one by one. First, he mentioned the age distribution. He says that there's an underrepresentation of those aged 18 to 41, while those aged 58 and above are overrepresented. What's your reaction to this, Ronald?
I still have to go intently in terms of what the Dr. Birola had posted. I think it was posted in in social media. But what we do note is that, well, basically our sampling method secures that there is representation and that the total survey results will be representative of the entire country. Whether there's an undersampling of age group, I need to check whether this is something within the margin of error for that particular segment. We'll reply to Dr. Birolas. But the thing is that we've done these surveys and we feel that it is nationally representative.
All right, he had a second point, and that was in terms of educational attainment. According to Virola, he said those who reached college or have a college education are underrepresented, while those who did not finish college or reach college are overrepresented. Can we get your reaction on that?
Well, it's the same thing. It's really a question of whether the supposed underrepresentation or overrepresentation of groups based on their educational attainment would have an impact on the representativeness of the total sample. It's pretty difficult to really come up with a survey that would really match the proportion based on educational attainment. In the first place, it's difficult to come up with a sampling frame where you have knowledge about who are the people who had graduated from the elementary and who are the people who eventually completed college. So I'll check what Dr. Birola says, but as I said, regardless of the undersampling or oversampling that he observes, it's a question of whether it will have an impact on the overall results and how representative this is of voting preferences.
All right, so just allow me to go to his third point, because we do need to ask you about that. This one is in terms of socio-economic classes. He says those who belong to classes A, B, and C, or the upper and middle classes, are underrepresented, while the poorer classes, D and E, are overrepresented. And he says that 92% of your respondents are from classes D and E, but government data shows only 47% belong to these classes. What's your reaction to that?
My initial reading of Dr. Birola's post, based on what was shared to me, indicates that he's using a study that was done, I think, in 2010 or 2012, that comes up with a different socioeconomic classification, which is distinct from the socioeconomic classification that we use and that most market research and public opinion firms use. So those are two different socioeconomic classifications. I think that one SEC has about 6 clusters. On the other hand, we normally use the A, B, C, D, and E. I will have to check how these two intersect, and essentially, because, you can do one study that shows that, the population is distributed this way, but you need to continue to explore that distribution in subsequent studies. What we've seen in our own surveys is that the ABCDE classification is a stable classification across time in the surveys that we've done since 1999.
All right. Now, Mr. Virola, he also pointed to the case of the United States, where Hillary Clinton was way ahead of Donald Trump in the surveys, but as we know, Trump still won that election. Is it possible that could happen in the Philippines?
That's possible because, one of the things that, survey organizations have noted is that there are things that you cannot in any way account for. One will be voting turnout, which is the case of what happened in the United States. People who in the past did not vote eventually turn out to vote. The second one, which was the case in the United States, is really the refusal for people to express their preference in the interviews or the surveys that were conducted. We're not seeing that much in the Philippines, but you see, for example, in our current survey, about 5% refuse to fill up the ballot. And this is already the ballot that secures much more confidentiality in terms of expressing their preference. So we don't know whether it will happen. It's possible. We do not rule out that possibility. But in the past, our surveys, especially the ones closest to the election, come very close to the actual results, Leah.
All right. Now, Ronald, there are also others who are comparing the methodology between traditional surveys and Google Trends. So some say, like Pulse Asia, Google Trends are also indicative, or at least could predict the next winner of the election, such as what happened in France and some other countries. Your thoughts on that?
Well, again, it's another area. I'm sorry. As an academic, I would have to accept my own limitations. I've not studied what Google Trends can offer as a means of predicting voting behavior. What I can only say is that maybe it requires more attention. I've seen studies in the past that use other methods in terms of predicting voting behavior. This includes sentiment analysis. This includes really basically internet searches like Google Trends. But I would have to really examine them more deeply. What I can say is that, there are other methods of really trying to track voting behavior and voting decisions, and it's not only surveys. And all of these methods have their advantages and their limitations also.
That's right. Now, for the Pulse Asia surveys on national candidates, are these surveys commissioned by any individual or any organization, or is it something that Pulse Asia, that you do out of your own initiative?
Any published survey of Pulse Asia is our own survey. These are non-commissioned surveys. We do not release commissioned surveys because there's an embargo. So anything that we publish is our own survey, and we've conducted these surveys over the past 22 years. No single party commissioned the survey. Even if there is no subscriber, we will conduct the survey.
All right. Thank you for that, Ronald. Thank you for being here. That was Pulse Asia President Ronald Holmes. Thank you for your time. Coming up, Senator Laila de Lima wants the Justice Department to drop the charges against her after a second witness retracts his statement on her supposed links to the illegal drug trade. Prosecutor General Benedicto Malcontento joins us live after the break. Please stay tuned.